enormous opportunity for NACFE to engage further with people in Chicago. Since I grew up in Illinois, this is particularly exciting for me. You'd take me to the next slide, please. The origins, as HG described, was fall of last year, nearly a year ago. And I was excited when my presentation on truck sustainability went out over some really cool presentations on charging systems going into apartment complexes, e-scooters and whatnot. My passion was to explain that Chicago's got one heck of a lot of 13 and 15 liter diesel engines running all over the interstates. And there's an opportunity to clean those vehicles up. After the stakeholder challenge, we formed an all-volunteer team, which was absolutely stunning. We've had over 30 individuals involved. And for all of you on the call today, thank you, thank you, thank you. There's times where my personal workload and things overtook my ability to serve leading on these, but these teams have moved forward without me at times. It was wonderful. We had so many people, we actually broke up the group into teams, one on air and healthcare, another on fleets, on EVs, on hydrogen, another one on grants, more. Our challenge was to create a roadmap for Greater Chicagoland, especially finding some short-term opportunities for success, as well as laying out a plan for long-term conversion. So what I can tell you all, this has been an absolutely amazing information sharing and growth and networking. So it has been extremely helpful to me, and I hope it's been helpful to others. Next slide, please. As we looked at the environment and the situation here, you can see from this the air quality health indexes around Greater Chicagoland, and our team looked at it, and it just screams that there are opportunities to do better around I-290, I-55, I-94, some around the Chicago Skyway. But if you want to know where sustainability efforts in trucking could play a huge role, this is it. That this was there's a lot of other maps similar to this with slightly different information, but this one is probably the most colorfully visual, understanding the environmental justice opportunity that there are areas of Chicago that are very green and others that are extremely red and screaming out for anything we can do to help cut emissions in those areas. So thank you to the team that helped us put this information together in this analysis. Next slide, please. So we looked and talked about a lot of different things, and the team elected to narrow it down to just looking at, for trucking, at battery electric trucks and hydrogen fuel cell trucks, as well as the infrastructure that goes along with them and the funding support, be they grants, incentives, make-ready funding via utilities and whatnot. Also spent some time looking at the ports in and around Chicago. You know, I may have spent a lot of years in Illinois and an awful lot of time on the interstates up there. We learned an awful lot about the number of intermodal rail yards that are there. Obviously, everyone knows there's 2 airports, but probably the most stunning information to me were the numerous day moves of containers between the intermodal rail yards. It's easier for the rail companies to put a container on a truck, send it across the interstate to a different rail yard than it is to transfer it via the tracks yard to yard. So it's not an aspect that I'd ever contemplated. And now when I'm stuck in traffic, I'll know to consider that. But these were the areas that we focused on. Next slide, please. I'm now going to turn it over to Tim Milburn, very helpful to us, as well as engagement with Chicago area clean cities and other things that have been very supportive of our efforts here.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Good morning, everybody, and thank you all for your participation. As Dave said, I'm Tim Milburn. I'm on the steering committee for Chicago Area Clean Cities, and I have a business in Park Ridge called Greenways to Go. So throughout the next hour or so, we're going to start a constructive dialogue with the people on the call. We're really focusing on fleets interested in transportation electrification. We're going to facilitate this with questions that came from the registration, hopefully from the chat rooms now, and some questions that we organized ourselves. So we know there's a lot of questions out there. We're looking for your ideas or your perceptions and concerns. We're looking to kind of tap into the collective brain power of people on the call and listen to your views and learn. We will contribute with answers, but we really would like to hear from you. And as such, you all know the drill. Please enter comments or questions in the chat room, and we will do our best to respond in the time allowed. If you want to put your hand up, raise your hand, use that feature, we will give you the floor. So the other thing is we are time constrained, so we appreciate your patience if we can't get to your questions today. This discussion is a start of such exchanges of ideas, and we intend to have more meetings. Today's discussions will be informed by those questions of what we do next. So my role is to kind of facilitate the question process. We're going to be asking the audience to contribute to the answers as well as members of our volunteer team while I try to keep an eye on the clock. So let's get started. So the first question is about barriers. So what are the major barriers for a fleet to move to electric vehicles? And I would, if there's anybody in the audience with opinion, we would appreciate it. Otherwise, we certainly can have some ideas.
Anyone from the audience that would like to speak up and join in with barriers? And Tim, as you were speaking, I was doing my best to look down through the list of attendees. A lot of our fleets are not on the call yet, so.
Okay.
Hey, Dave and Tim, this is Jan Kalp at EAQ Mobility. I think Dave, you and I have talked about this a few times. One of the barriers that certainly we see is the complexity in the decision process, right? That there are so many variables among the EV truck manufacturers and charger manufacturer and incentives and cost of electricity, and all these variables so stack up into a really complex ball of twine. And from a fleet perspective, you legitimately are obsessed with operational reliability and cost control. And that transition, even though there may be awesome vehicles out there and NACFE is testing them, right, with your partners, nonetheless, that decision process is a tough one.
Thank you, Jan. Appreciate that feedback. You're spot on. There are a lot of portions of the equation that fleets have absolutely no familiarity with. Mm. And if there's one thing most truck fleets don't tolerate, it's unknowns. Right. But all of you like getting your e-commerce packages the next day or 2 days later, whatever, and you want that known delivery. You can only imagine the pressure that the fleets are under to deliver to an assembly plant where it needs to be on time to keep the factory moving. And that could be any number of things. I've spoken to people with delivering chickens and other such things. There's a lot of challenges in the transportation industry, and unknowns that might lead to downtime are intolerable to most truck fleets. Great point. Are there others that would like to jump in on where they see barriers?
Gary King brought up one here on the shortage of drivers being challenging right now as well.
That's
I see that as in talking with a lot of transportation outfits, they seem to be really struggling. And I know at Allstate, even with our roadside service program and getting providers out to do rescues, we have an extreme shortage of drivers as well. So I see that as a barrier, but I also see that going electrification is probably going to open it up to attract a lot more candidates, especially the younger ones that are very interested in electric vehicles. I'm seeing that as being something that's driving a lot of attention. So, but I do see it as a barrier, and I'm hoping we can find solutions for those quickly.
Good point, Gary. We've had the opportunity at NACFE of working very closely with a number of fleets on electrification. I'll tell you more on that in a bit. What we were intrigued to find was the driver feedback from the drivers that are driving electric vehicles. that they absolutely love it. Several of them admitted they were very hesitant when they were first told they'd be driving an electric truck. And once they got into it and experienced it, how much they loved it, how hard it would be to tear it away from them. That and the reasons are wide and varied. One of the ones I found very intriguing, I've met this gentleman personally, works with a Class 8 yard tractor at a major distribution center, and says, man, you know, over time, I'm fueling my diesel yard hostler, and there's times where you accidentally spill some diesel fuel, and if you're standing next to the vehicle's fuel tank, is up on your boots. And it's amazing how fast diesel fuel ruins a pair of good work boots. Said, I absolutely love my electric yard tractor. Not only can I not spill diesel fuel on my pants or my shoes anymore, but when I get home, I don't even need to take a shower before I eat dinner. My wife can't smell work on me anymore. So it's intriguing the feedback we're getting from drivers that are experiencing real battery electric trucks.
Very encouraging.
We had a question question from Jim Longino. He would like to chip in. Jim?
Hi, can you see me okay?
Yes.
We can hear you. There you are.
There you are. Hey, hi, I'm Jim Longino. I'm the outreach manager for industrial manufacturing in the southwest side of Chicago for the Greater Southwest Development Corporation. And I'm really thrilled that you are conducting this today. There was a question about barriers. One of the things that came to mind, I think someone touched upon it briefly, was in regards to obviously the different manufacturers of these vehicles. But I'm looking at it from the perspective of so many independent truck drivers are going into so many of our intermodal facilities. How does a small fleet driver who's trying to maintain their bottom line and have already invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in their own independent rig, getting into the electrification just for the vehicle itself seems to be prohibitive, as much as it is such a great idea. That barrier alone, trying to get to the smaller fleet owners and independent truckers, I think is going to be something that needs to be overcome, and programs in place to try to help alleviate that, much like we've done with some of the subsidies for the electric cars and EVs.
Jim, that is an excellent question, and I don't think there's an excellent answer for your excellent question. That historically, people doing drayage work and whatnot are using vehicles that are on their second or third ownership cycle. So they're not purchasing new vehicles. And it's going to take phenomenal support. They're also not the kind of organizations that have significant office staff to go chasing grants to even pursue that kind of thing. So I don't have a good answer for you on how to do that. I think as we look at California, where more of this is farther along, what we're seeing is the major truck fleets, the NFIs, Schneiders, and others, making efforts to electrify their drayage operations. And how to get an owner-operator into a truck that's cost 2 to 3 times as much as a new truck, and they're not buying new, so it's many times more expensive than that versus what they're buying on the used market. That's an enormous challenge to the truck industry that there's no, at least to me, obvious short-term answer.
Yeah, I think the part of that is until there's decent charging power that's ubiquitous for the independents, because it's going to be tough for them to make large-scale investments in the infrastructure as well as the vehicles. So once that comes along, then the vehicles become perhaps the only investment they can survive with charging based on ROI with fuel savings and maintenance cost reduction. But we're not there yet.
Tim, it is a good point. It's interesting to see what IKEA has done, right? Because they use independent contractors to do delivery of furniture, right? Of bulk. And they are on a mission to decarbonize their supply chain for their, I think, 100 stores in the US. And what they're doing is creating a model where they take, I think, some of the risk they take ownership of the utilization risk of those electric trucks and lease them through a company called Fluid. So it's early days, but they are trying to create a model where independent contractors are not left hanging with a really big investment and no client to use it.
Thank you.
So I'm thinking in the interest of time, I actually have quite a few questions and we're just on the first one. So I'm going to move on, and I'm hearing this is a good topic for more discussion. Another one that I've heard from some places is, how does the EV adventure start for fleets and move forwards? How does one develop a successful plan? Anybody out there who's done this or has recommendations?
There's a guy here from Oak Park, Illinois.
Ken.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear how he's doing with his decarbonization efforts there. The polity in Oak Park, and I'm a resident, I still own my house on East Avenue. I think that would be interesting to hear how they're doing. And certainly, Oak Park straddling the Eisenhower would certainly benefit from more decarbonization efforts. Sorry to volunteer you, but I just thought I'd like to hear what he's got to say about it. And he is a fleet manager there. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
I really didn't have a choice, evidently.
Sorry, man. Here, listen, I met you when I was with Nissan.
Oh yeah.
Maves probably about 3 years back.
Yeah.
I knew that you were involved in it. I remember the story about your first electric car.
Oh God. I'm looking at it right now. Don't remind me.
It's still there. Okay.
Still
Right.
here. Their shuttle vehicle.
Right.
So as far as successful, we found to the lack of a better word, bean counters, return investment with us, we're 4.5 square miles, stop and go, short hops. They don't drive far. So I couldn't justify a really expensive electric car, but Nissan, when we went to do this, we were involved in renovating our parking lot at our village hall so we could get charging stations, which then allowed me to look at EVs. Nissan had a really nice fleet rebate. And then we leased our vehicles for 1 year because we were not eligible for the tax rebate. So the leasing company took half of the rebate and we took the other half of the rebate, and then the vehicles equaled what I was paying for hybrids. So now I'm not paying for oil changes. Brakes are going 2 to 3 times a regular life cycle of a regular car. And it's been great. And education, teaching people how to use the vehicle, the benefits of it, I found that to be the biggest hurdle, because so many people don't know anything about it. Just getting our hybrids, we had to re-educate people. We got a lot of phone calls about, my car won't start, can you please come and jumpstart it? No, it says ready to drive. Just because the engine's not running does not mean it won't move. Okay? With any technology, it's until it becomes the norm, we're going to have these sessions. We're going to be discussing it with people. We're going to be re-educating people. There's a lot of misinformation in addition to information. Just looking at all the videos, oh, look, there's an electric car on fire. Oh my God, those are dangerous. I just had my seminar where I described to my people, you're riding a Molotov cocktail. There's 20 gallons of explosive fluid underneath you. That's just normal. You're used to it. And the electric vehicles have really, they're a lot safer than the gas ones. It's just, we don't know them. They're not normal yet. So, I mean, until it becomes the norm, it's going to be an uphill battle for all of us. And until it becomes cost effective, the battery prices come down, it's going to be a struggle. I'm all for greening also, but I have this much money to spend. So if it's between, I do have some vehicles that can't justify electrics because they don't put the miles on for me to get the return investment. I'm currently trying to get 1 or 2 electric vans next year. And I figured I'd be saving $2,000 per year per vehicle. And if it's for my animal control, it'll take me 5 years to recoup that. If it's for my water shop, it might take me 3 years. So it all depends on what that department has as far as funds for the initial outlay. We got successful. I will say part of it's luck because of the rebate timing was perfect. It coincided perfectly with my parking lot project. Getting as many people involved in it as possible. I didn't know we had funds for charging stations until I got tossed on that committee. So, all right, I have now charging stations for more than the amount of vehicles I have, which is why I am able to get more next year, in theory, depending on budget. We're in talks about that, and I don't know what's happening yet.
Thank you, Ken. That's great input. Anybody else out there have some ideas on the adventure of electrification?
So this is Jim O'Leary with NFI, and we've had some experience with electrifying our fleet out in California. And I think the most important thing is, as fleets consider how they get started, is that you need to look at application first, right? I think there's enough information out there today that we know that the technology cannot electrify all aspects of Class 8, trucking, or even, light duty as well, right? So you need to look at an application where electrification is viable. I think that's the first thing. And then you need to select a site that makes sense. And as you're selecting a site, some of the things you need to consider are, do you own the site? Do you lease the site? Who's helping to pay for the infrastructure that you're going to put into this? Are there incentives at that location as well? And then I think then immediately after that, you need to start having conversations with the local utility, all right? And then once you've kind of had all these conversations going in all those different directions, right? Then you decide whether you're going to move forward or not, and start engaging, the manufacturers of the trucks, and try to partner with one that can help you along the way. But the other important thing is that it has to be an organizational buy-in, right? Gone are the days where the procurement guy or the fleet guy sits in the back office and, works with the OE directly. And, all of a sudden he puts 50 trucks on order, and then 6 months later, you're getting 50 trucks into your fleet. It doesn't work like that with electric at all. You need to involve the real estate group, the finance group. You've got legal involved in different types of contracting. All of those things, it's really changing the way that we procure our vehicles moving forward into the future.
Those are some excellent points. I call that the electrification ecosystem. It's different than buying mature diesel fleet vehicles. You have to think differently. The money comes through different channels. There's multiple partners in some cases, and it's more complicated. And we need to figure out how to simplify or streamline that.
Hey, Tim,
Yeah.
I just want to comment on what Jim just said. I'd like him to actually speak to the polity, the thing that kind of drove NFI to make the decisions that they had there, because there has to be buy-in. But NFI, they're a very forward-thinking organization, right? But it started from the top down that this is something that they were going to get involved in. And I know a lot of it has to do with the way that their leaders think. Jim, can you speak to that? Because I think that in a way is almost more important than, you got to start there to get down to the level that Jim's talking about.
Yeah, sure. I think it's twofold, right? Yes, our leaders, one of our core values is social responsibility, right? So that's where it starts, right? And then we've developed a strategy, right, where sustainability, it's like a three-pronged strategy that involves our customers, that involves innovation, right, and involves people. We believe that, being green and these green initiatives and getting our hands on electric vehicles, right, and reducing our carbon footprint touches on all three prongs of that strategy, right? And to focus in on the customer value part of it is, as a 3PL, we have to bring value to our customers, right? Is that always pricing, right? It doesn't always have to be we're the lowest cost provider, that we're usually not, right? But what we're willing to do is we're willing to invest in this new technology, right? And then be able to say, hey, if you want to partner with somebody, now more than ever, all these like companies like IKEA, Walmart, zero, carbon neutral by 2035, carbon neutral by 2040. They don't know exactly how they're getting there, but we want to be a provider as a 3PL that they could look to say, hey, I want to partner with NFI. They're already making the commitment and we want to make a commitment to them. So that's why we believe it's so important at this particular moment in time.
Thank you, gentlemen. Yeah, that's some great points. Unfortunately, we're have to move on to the next section. We will have more questions and answers to follow. We could maybe pick some of this up, but with that, I want to pass this off back to Dave to talk about some of the technology aspects of fleet electrification. All yours, Dave.
Thanks, Tim. Great feedback. Love hearing Oak Park, NFI. What I heard there from both of them was get as many people in the organization and outside the organization as possible involved. And we'll touch on some of what NACFE's learned as we've been through this. Next slide, please. There are so many different ways in the medium duty, heavy duty truck world you can move to cleaner fuels, whether you're simply running biodiesel or blends of that nature or whatnot. There are certainly a lot of things going on in the gaseous market with renewable natural gas, recently renewable liquid propane. But the whole green box surrounding battery electric is just an incredible growth area for trucking. And there's quite a number of different hybrids that are there with diesel, with gasoline, with CNG or RNG. I would even go so far as to call hydrogen a hybrid, that we at NACFE include hydrogen fuel cells as a form of a battery electric vehicle. So there's just a lot of different choices, a lot of venture capitalists, a lot of researchers finding ways to clean up trucks with alternative fuels. Next slide, please. And the last slide, NACFE refers to that as the messy middle. The next 2 or 3 decades are going to be sorting through all of those technologies and fuel choices and figuring out what works best and what's making a difference. As we look across the country, there are 15 states in Washington, D.C. that about a year ago signed a memorandum of understanding to really push forward with EV trucks and set some goals on the right-hand side there. These states are looking for 30% of new trucks sold in 2030 to be electric vehicles. 30 by 30 is no longer an ESPN special. It's a goal that these leading states have for electric truck sales. What's fairly obvious here, since we're talking about the greater Chicagoland area, you don't see any green in the heartland there, other than Colorado out in the mountains. So we in the Midwest have a struggle. We need to figure out how this is going to work and how we want to play into this. So this goes from top legislative folks on down to help, again, whole community to make these things work. For instance, New York, NYSERDA has grants that will cover the incremental cost of going from an new internal combustion engine vehicle to a battery electric vehicle. Can you imagine having someone stepping in and funding 95% of the cost difference? All of a sudden, the risk factor goes down. It becomes more tolerable. I'm willing to take a chance on a truck or two. Next slide, please. So we know change is in the air. There's a whole lot of things going on in the e-commerce world. Amazon has a, I don't know what, for lack of a better term, partnership with Rivian. They're looking for 100,000 electric delivery trucks out of Rivian in the next several years. UPS has partnered up with Rival. FedEx, I believe, has partnered up with BrightDrop and others. We've got DHL running vehicles. So we're going to see in your communities electric trucks making deliveries if your area is one of those supported that can support this initial transition. Obviously, over time, we'll get there. The question is the greater Chicagoland area embracing and working and wanting to see that happen here? Trust me, and I don't know this for a fact, I seriously doubt Amazon wants to put one electric truck at all of their different facilities. That's not likely. They need the support, the training, the parts, service. So they'll start in the areas that are most supportive of the change. As we look at the greater Chicagoland area as well, we've got Rivian with an assembly plant in Bloomington, Illinois. We've got Lion Electric building a brand new assembly plant in Joliet, Illinois. So two of the major players in electrification are making major investments in Illinois. Sorry, I never say Illinois. We're looking at major fleets. Appreciate Mr. O'Leary's comment there. There's also fleets like Schneider, UPS Express, and others that in the past year, for the first time ever, have released sustainability reports for their fleets. So the pressure to become part of the answer is increasing on truck fleets. So it's exciting to see all this change in the air. Next slide, please. One of the things that just concluded last week was the third ever Run on Less demonstration. The first two Run on Less demonstrations, the one in 2017 was with long haul sleeper tractors. The second one in 2019 was with regional haul trucks. For 2021, the Run on Less demonstration went to 13 different OEM battery electric trucks all over the US and Canada. You don't have to live under a palm tree to make a battery electric truck work for you. And as you look at this, we thank NFI for their involvement. They had a Class 8 truck from Volvo operating out in California. They also had a Kalmar yard tractor, Hostler. They go by a lot of different names. So they were a big part of showing this. All this information from these 13 locations is shared on runonless.com. So if you're on this call wanting to learn more, runonless.com has some answers for you. I'll get into that deeper here in a moment. But another difference in the demonstration for 2021 were the different styles of vehicles. It wasn't just Class 8 tractor trailers. There were medium duty box trucks. There are step vans such as the Perlator e-commerce vehicle up in Vancouver, the DHL vehicle running in Manhattan. There were 3 different yard tractors. I know one of the yard tractor companies, I asked them just recently, do you have yard tractors in the greater Chicagoland area? And they replied, yes, there are about 20 different fleets running electric yard tractors in the greater Chicagoland area. So there are people making these steps in Illinois. You may not know it. You won't see a yard tractor out on the highway, most likely. Most of them aren't even licensed. They're considered an off-road vehicle and they never leave the distribution center. So this is a great way to learn about electrification if you're interested. Next slide, please. Some of those channels for learning, when you go to runonless.com, there are fleet videos that interview the drivers, the fleet leaderships, the OEMs, the actual videos of the vehicles themselves. There are different stories from the road every day during the 3 weeks this occurred, talking about EV trucking issues. There's a fleet profile posted for every fleet with information on their fleet, their truck, their charging system, their duty cycle. There's also daily metrics. You can go in and select any of the 13 different vehicles. You can select your units of measure, and then you can select a day or a range of days to look at what that vehicle was doing. So if you want to understand what vehicles and charging system requirements are, a great way to learn. Additionally, there's an EV boot camp that was part of Run on Less, and there are 10 sessions with over 48 industry experts sharing their insight. So for all of you that are on here that really want to learn about electric trucks, there's an enormous opportunity for you to do so. Next slide, please. And to one of the most recent comments about different trucks that are available, want to point all of you toward CalSTART. Just a year ago, they initiated a new online tool called Zeti, Zero Emission Technology Inventory. And this is a slide capture of the homepage there. When you go into it, the first thing you do is select a vehicle platform. So it wants to know, are you looking at a school bus, a transit bus, yard tractor, etc. And then you can select a time frame that you're looking to make a purchase. And as you start making these selections, the OEM logos go away and only those offering a product remain on that page. And then you can select and click on one of those logos and it'll take you right to their web pages for that vehicle. So for those of you trying to learn and keep up, there are a whole lot of new OEMs bringing electric vehicles into the commercial truck world. This is out there and an absolutely fabulous tool. My thanks to CalSTART for what they've put up here. Next slide, please. One of the things I was asked to talk about today was the total cost of ownership. The truck fleets don't make vehicle purchase based on emotion. It's a very calculated operation to be risk-free, to maximize profits. So as truck fleets are looking at battery electric versus internal combustion engine, purchase price is clearly a negative factor. It's likely to go up by a factor of 2 or 3 to go to battery electric. I opted not to put a color to residual value. Right now, that's a complete unknown. The industry has very, very little as a current basis of experience to know what the residual value will be of a battery electric truck. And just to give you an idea, fleets normally have very, very good ideas what the residual values of their vehicles are. And for those fleets that run vehicles until they're absolutely dead, till they're no longer safe to operate, they know what the scrap value is of all the metal in that truck, but there's still several $1,000s on the lot, even when the truck doesn't want to run anymore. Some positive areas, operation. If the electricity and time of use costs are appropriate, you're going to be in a better situation than you are with diesel and many of the other alternatives. Maintenance, I appreciated the feedback from Oak Park on extending brake life and whatnot. There is an expectation of significant savings. It hasn't been totally proven yet. The vehicles that are out like in run on less are going to be able to show that. The challenge that's already been discussed is infrastructure. It's costly to rip up the lot, bring in, work with your utility company, with electrical contractor to put in the charging facilities for these vehicles. These aren't simple tasks to do in most cases when we're talking about larger vehicles. It's something we're learning about and finding ways to do it more effectively. One other area I elected to add, because I was just at a conference last week, is fuel tax. So for right now, at least, depending on your state, you may be getting away from the fuel tax that you're paying on every single gallon of diesel or gas that you're buying because you're running an electric vehicle. So there's a lot of different factors that are changing in the total cost of ownership and model, and there are several different cost of ownership models that are available. Next slide, please. When you're looking at infrastructure, I appreciate Ken and Jim and their discussions. This is a real challenge. Fleets aren't used to working with utilities, and most utility companies aren't used to working with truck fleets. So there are some inherent challenges we need to overcome, and fleets and the electric vehicle supply equipment, the charging system suppliers, are unknown to each other for the most part. So again, to both of the gentlemen that spoke already, it takes a village here to understand which charger, which connector, which vehicle, how do I work with my utility? And there is a report I can help find for you on working on infrastructure. Next slide, please. I'd like to turn it back over to Tim for continued discussion now.
Thank you, Dave. So I've pulled up the questions. Several of them came through the registration, and there's I don't know, there's a general concern about the cost of the infrastructure that you were just speaking to. What kind of electrical power capacities are needed? Charging levels, DC fast chargers versus level 2, and kind of a focus on, how do we get to the class 8 charging, and are there chargers that can actually charge class 8s? So if I don't know if there's anybody out there who's had experience in making these investments or the plans that can speak to this.
John Truckenbrod, would you like to address it from the light duty side?
Dave, you caught me answering an email. I'm sorry. We're waiting.
On charging system costs and moving forward with charging systems. I know you're involved in charging systems from a light duty standpoint. Can you talk a little bit about what it would cost a fleet for a slow charge, AC charge versus DC fast charging?
Yeah, you know what? There's a great difference, right? In level 2, the 240 volt chargers as compared to the DC fast. Basically, like incentives try to push you toward or direct you, I should say, toward a dual port level 2 charger. A 5-year program, including installation and network, they generally steer you to a dollar figure of about $15,000 installed and operated for 5 years. Where with DC fast, you're talking something closer to 150,000. So there's a great difference there. Now, a lot of the bus fleets I know are using level 2. And I was a bit surprised by that initially. I thought, well, wow, these are 150 kW batteries. These are big trucks, right? But if you think about it, a lot of these vehicles are only traveling 40, 60, 80 miles a day. So they can replenish that battery pretty easily with a level 2 charger. Level 2 charger, 240 volts, is going to give you about 25 to 30 miles of charge in an hour. So you can easily overnight recharge that battery.
Thanks, John. Are there others on that can talk a little bit more to charging system infrastructure costs?
Yeah, Dave, I'll chime in here because this is something that we're actually going through, and I'll talk a little bit about it later when I'm presenting on charging at our fleet. But we're actually looking right now to do our first DC fast charger. Our entire fleet is currently charged with level 2 chargers. And I heard Ken mention this earlier. Something to keep an eye on is really whether or not the DC fast charger you're going for has a network connectivity requirement, which is something we've never experienced with our level 2s. But it's something that we're experiencing a lot. Not only are we spending about $55,000 to $65,000 for the hardware for a DC fast charger, not including installation and electricity utility upgrades. Certain manufacturers will require that you have a network connectivity, which can do some cool things like driver authentication. You can track your energy usage per charger and occasionally per vehicle. But for a fleet like ours, where it's 25 vehicles, and we have a pretty good understanding of who's driving and it's private property, we know people from the public aren't using our charger, it's not really something that's necessary, but it really does add up in the long term. To invest $65,000 into a charging station and not being able to use it unless you continue to pay a few $1,000s a year for eternity wasn't really a good deal for us.
Great
That's an
insights,
excellent
Liam.
point. Excellent point.
Hey, Dave, this is John McCann with ComEd. I would just like to add a couple things. First of all, from an infrastructure standpoint, the most important thing for us is early engagement or early notice when you're considering adding chargers. We might have to bring in additional capacity to the site. And depending upon what that work looks like, that could take anywhere from 4 months to even up to a year if we have to bring in brand new feeder out. Some of the things from a cost standpoint, typically customers are entitled to what their standard power usage is. So from an on-site, when we're talking about at the site itself, all the transformation and switchgear is typically pretty much covered. There might be some charges for minimal things. If there's work done outside normal operating hours, there might be some cost there, but that's typically not much of a cost there. Where there tends to be costs are in the off-property work. And even for that, we have a tariff It's called Rider DE. It's a line extension tariff where customers are entitled to a 5-year revenue credit based upon the delivery service we anticipate seeing. So it helps to offset that. And if there is costs for off property through that tariff, those are then refundable, for up to 10 years or until the customer gets their money back. I'm just giving you a high level. There's different pieces to that, but I just want to kind of add some color to, what the requirements are from a utility standpoint.
And excuse me real quick, one of the other questions that was asked is sort of what are the steps? So a fleet says, maybe in 2022, they get 2 trucks and the next year they get 10 and the next year they get 100 or whatever. How do they plan with that working with the utility? How do they anticipate site upgrades and along some sort of a plan?
So we're actually going through that now with, some of the customers on this call. I won't call them out, but we're also doing that with Amazon, where they've identified potentially how many vehicles they're looking at each of their last mile facilities. So we're looking at that. I think, from our standpoint, the more information we have in terms of what that build out looks like, the better off we are. The customer can always put in all the work on their side to be ready for, if they have the need for 20 chargers. And for us, we'll work with them on the timing that they have to meet the power needs.
So whatever upgrades to whatever part of your system will be coincident with those plans and perhaps other fleets in the region.
Correct. Yeah. And that's why I say, for us, the most important part of it is really having an awareness and being engaged early with our new business department and our capacity planning. We plan out the loading on our system. We look at it short-term needs. We also look at it in 5 and 10 year needs, through our capacity planning team. So the more information we have, the better off we will be able to meet a customer's power needs.
So a fleet should reach out to ComEd or any utility and start that process as part of their due diligence and planning.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm going to pick a different question because we've only got a little bit of time.
John, I got to ask a quick follow-up of John.
Sorry, Dave. Sorry.
John, are you the key contact for truck fleets to find their way into ComEd and have these discussions?
I'm a one-man show. So,
okay.
But I absolutely will assist, and I have been assisting many customers. So just trying to lower expectations that I can handle everyone's request at once. But yes, I will get any customer to the right person to help. And if that means working with them, I will do that. In many situations, we have an account manager staff. It's called Large Customer Services. Customers who are larger, so over 500 kW, already have an account manager that I can put them in touch with. But I will make sure to get anyone the help that they need.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So another area that came up was the concern about batteries in cold and hot weather. So what are some of the things that can be done at the vehicle level and or where the vehicles are based, and what really does the ambient temperature mean to range?
This is Kate Tomford. I'll chime in just with my experience at CTA.
Hi, Kate.
Hello. Let me get my video on too. So good to see everyone. Thank you for hosting this today, and glad to be a part of it. So we have our electric buses currently right now designed with diesel auxiliary heaters. And we found that was required because without those heaters, the hit to the range in cold weather was about 40%. And as somebody else was saying earlier on this call, we have very high requirements for reliability of our service. We have to get the buses out in the morning. They have to be on time. They have to be able to run their scheduled service and complete it. So we don't have the option of taking that hit to the range. it would frankly require us to have a lot more buses, which we can't afford and don't have space for. So just to be able to count on the range that is specified, we do have those auxiliary heaters. One thing that we're going to be testing coming up is trying to precondition the buses before they go out for service and while they're still hooked up to their charging infrastructure. So that would be a way to use grid power rather than battery power to get both the cabin to its service temperature. Some of our garages are outdoors, so the buses are very cold in the cabin overnight. Also, the battery system itself needs to be conditioned to be able to operate at an optimal efficiency. So that's a step that we're going to be looking at. I'm not aware of any transit bus manufacturers that have really cracked the nut on this yet. And all the other colleagues I have that I've spoken with at other cold climate agencies have found this to be a great challenge. And most of them have turned to diesel heaters as the solution right now. But I know the manufacturers are working on this. It's a sticking point, certainly, because we all want to be able to claim that our buses are completely zero emissions. They are zero emissions from the propulsion system, but they do have that small amount of diesel emissions still in the very cold temperatures.
Just to be clear, you're saying the bus vendors, bus OEMs do not provide a battery thermal management system as an integral component to their batteries like the passenger ones do?
They do, but it's not sufficient for the
for your
coldest
range
climates.
needs. Okay.
Yeah.
Good input. Anybody
Well, I
else?
guess, I mean, and I will say, whether it's sufficient is really a judgment call based on how much flexibility you have in the operation of your vehicles. For us, meeting our duty cycles and our service schedule, it's not adequate. But for other circumstances, perhaps it would be.
And that's 40% at what, 0 degrees Fahrenheit or something? 40% loss?
Yeah, I would have to ask our bus engineers exactly how that was measured, but that's what they have described as the observation they've made of the range decrease in very cold weather.
Kate, is that the outset? When you start, it's measured at less than 40%, but certainly in operations, when it's moving and it gets warm, it's got to come back somewhat, doesn't it?
I believe it's over the course of operating. But again, I'd have to check with them exactly how they measured that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that you start off and the indication is that your battery is already down at only 60%. I think it's operating less efficiently and it's losing charge from the get-go.
Kate, could you tell us a little bit about your bus charging?
Sure. I will say I have to apologize. I have a call at 10, so I have about 3 minutes, but I can just tell you a little bit. We charge on 2 levels of chargers right now. They're both DC, but one is 150 kilowatts and one is 500 kilowatts. They have the 500 kilowatt ones are overhead connections from a pantograph arm supported on a mast. And the bus drives underneath, the pantograph arm drops down and contacts the roof of the bus and it engages and starts charging. In the garages, we do have some plug-in chargers, those lower powered chargers, but we are planning to move to all overhead charging with our next deployment of what we call slow chargers, the 150 kilowatt. So we're actually looking at a technology that's a single 180 kilowatt charger that has connections to 3 pantographs. So you can optimize the delivery of power across the 3 buses and schedule it and ensure that you're also minimizing cost by timing the power delivery after peak hours on ComEd's grid. So there are a lot of advantages, I think, if we can roll that out at scale and have that charge management benefit, but we haven't tested it yet.
Awesome information, Kate. Thank you for sharing that. As truck fleets in the Chicagoland area look to make similar changes, it's nice to know they've got people like you that can lean on to learn about different processes and systems to attain their goals.
Yeah, we're always happy to share our experience and love hearing about what others are doing as well. So thank you.
Yeah, that's kind of what this is all about. We are now at the next break point where we're going to move into funding and incentives and such. So I'm going to hand the ball over to Samantha Bingham with the City of Chicago Transportation. Samantha, you got it.
Thanks, Tim. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Jess. Thanks, Tim, and thank you to the Advanced Energy Group for initiating this task force last December. I'd also like to thank Dave Schaller for his leadership on this task force and for our working groups who are working on the roadmap for zero emission vehicles in Illinois, and then the work team that is helping to organize today's event, the Fleet Forum. As Tim mentioned, I'm Samantha Bingham. I'm the Clean Transportation Program Director for the City of Chicago's Department of Transportation, where I work on programs, projects, and policies that help reduce direct emissions from our transportation sector here in the Chicago area. I also serve as the coordinator for the Chicago Area Clean Cities Coalition. CACC is a 501c3 not-for-profit that is a part of the U.S. Department of Energy's Clean Cities Initiative. We are a consortium, a true coalition of public and private partners working together to on the shared vision of clean cities to reduce petroleum use in the transportation sector, resulting in more sustainable and healthy communities in the 6 counties Chicago area. We do this through the use of alternative fuels like biodiesel, natural gas, renewable propane, and electricity. And CACC provides unbiased information and technical resources to fleets if they need assistance. So please feel free to reach out to myself or anyone else on our board and steering committee if you need assistance or technical resources while you're deciding to green your fleet or run into any barriers. Next slide. I've been in my position here at CDOT for 15 years, and even prior to my tenure, through events like this and peer sharing, we've known that there are major hurdles to greening fleets across the country due to the incremental cost of the vehicles, the cost of infrastructure, and then also potentially the cost of the fuel compared to petroleum, petroleum traditional fueling infrastructure and vehicles. So this has been, in some cases, there have been incentives for quite a while. So I'm going to go over incentives that are currently available, and then Illinois Commerce Commission Commissioner Maria Bocanegra is going to speak to the legislative updates recently enacted in Springfield. And then this panel will conclude with Julian Safani from Lion Electric, and she'll share insights on the use of incentives from the electric commercial vehicle manufacturer's perspective. So I thought I would start from the top down and provide a quick summary of what is available with federal and national funding. The federal government has historically had a plug-in electric vehicle tax credit program and an infrastructure tax credit program. Sorry, there's some background noise. If someone could mute themselves. The vehicle program really speaks to light duty vehicles. So that tax credit is income tax credit, and it provides a credit for at a minimum $2,500 to $7,500 for eligible vehicles. And so that's really speaks to light duty vehicles. There aren't any larger vehicles that are currently eligible for that program. The infrastructure tax credits, that program is called the Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Tax Credit, and that provides 30% up to $30,000 for per alternative fuel infrastructure, so station, per location. That unfortunately is a program that keeps expiring. So it is definitely not as reliable as we had hoped. It expires actually at the end of this year, and continuously Congress acts to extend it year after year, but sometimes it expires and then it isn't reinstated for 2 years or so, and so those tax credits become retroactive. And as I mentioned, these are income tax credits, so not everyone will be able to participate, like local municipalities, not-for-profits, or entities, for-profit entities that don't have the tax liability. And as Ken said, he kind of created a workaround to be able to lease the vehicles and monetize some of that tax credit. The next program is the EPA's direct rebate program for school buses. That is historically available, and there has been no issues with that program. The US EPA also has a Diesel Emissions Reduction Act grant program. That is also a reliable program. It is competitive in nature, so you do need to apply, and for-profit entities, private fleets are not eligible to directly apply, but here in Illinois, the American Lung Association will bundle applications and act as the fiscal administrator of the grant, write the grant, and dole out the funds locally here in Illinois. They're a great resource if you want to partner on a JIRA application. An additional resource that's fairly consistent is the VALE program, the Federal Aviation Administration. These help provide zero emission vehicle funding and infrastructure funds for airport operations. So not only the entities managing the airports themselves, but also support equipment and vehicles. And that program is very reliable. And then CMAQ, the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program from the Federal Highway Administration. So in the Chicago region and the St. Louis area, these areas of Illinois qualify for this program due to our air quality issues and not meeting federal air quality standards. And so the Chicago area receives about $200 million, and it's programmed every 2 years. This has been a reliable source for the city, as we have leveraged it for over 25 years to enact local emissions reduction projects with fleets, both the city's fleet and private and public fleets throughout the region. Next slide. Now we'll move on to the state of Illinois and statewide programs. The Illinois EPA is kind of the one-stop shop for incentives currently for clean vehicles. The agency administers the Driving a Cleaner Illinois program. And that's kind of their overarching program for all of their funding resources. So currently they have Volkswagen Mitigation Trust funding that Commissioner will be speaking to in a little while. They have funding from CMAQ for school bus heaters, and they also have funding from CMAQ for green vehicles in the Chicago area. So regardless of where the funding sources come from, they've kind of bundled it all into Driving a Cleaner Illinois program. And then they issue calls for applications periodically, depending on when they have funds. So I highly encourage folks to register for their announcements and to be notified when they have a call for applications posted. And the last thing I wanted to mention was the Illinois Propane Gas Alliance. They currently have a rebate program for up to $4,000 for the purchase of propane or converted propane vehicles. And I know this event is about electric and hydrogen, but I wanted to flag it because it's a untraditional source of incentive funding, and so there may be other types of entities that are providing rebates. We've actually seen electric co-ops in some rural areas of Wisconsin provide incentives for electric vehicles to their customers. And so just wanted to flag that there may be some untraditional opportunities, and to check with Chicago Area Clean Cities and some other resources to be able to find out about those opportunities. Next slide. Local incentives in Illinois, there are only some incentives available in the Chicago area. I'm not aware of any other local incentives currently in the state. Drive Clean Chicago is a program that we manage here at the City of Chicago. We have a Drive Clean Truck program, which provides a point of sale discount on the purchase or lease of an electric Class 2 through Class 8 vehicle that operates primarily in the Chicago area. We have $18 million for this program, but it's currently on hold due to some holdups at the federal level. And we just applied for $20 million more. So we're really excited about the opportunity to have this program. Our first round of the program deployed almost 300 electric and hybrid, medium and heavy duty vehicles. And we look forward to being able to open up this program once again, once our federal funds come to us, hopefully within the next 6 to 12 months, but it's not in our control. So please stay tuned and stay connected to get more information about the program when it reopens. Drive Electric Chicago is a program that is also leveraging CMAQ funding. This funding is helping to electrify the city of Chicago's fleet and to actually provide charging stations at the airports. It's also currently, unfortunately, on hold because of the federal hangup on the funds coming to us. The M2M project, this is a Department of Energy program funded, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. It's providing incentives for a clean fuel corridor along I-94. It's administered by the Gas Technology Institute and in partnership with 7 Clean Cities coalitions from Michigan to North Dakota. Next slide. And last but not least, other potential resources and for incentives, could come from utilities, and Commissioner Bocanegra will speak to that during her presentation. Next slide. I will say, though, if you are interested to see what utilities have been doing across the country since about 2009, when highway speed electric vehicles were first announced by vehicle manufacturers, the Alternative Fuels Data Center is a great resource. If you go to the AFDC and click on laws and incentives, there is an option to see utility examples, and you can kind of get a feel for what other utilities across the country have been doing and piloting their programs regarding transportation electrification. So if you are a DIYer, if you like to do it yourself and you are so motivated to try to research these types of incentive programs yourself, the AFDC is a great resource for you. It'll help you identify all of the incentives that are available for your fleet and provide some great data resources and tools to help you make decisions. Or if you are not so motivated and don't have the time or just need to check in on more details, the Chicago Area Clean Cities is here to help. And you can contact us via the email address posted here, and you can also contact me. I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you all for thank you all of the attendees who have joined us today. I hope to hear from you if you need any assistance. And thank you, Commissioner Bocanegra, for joining us. You can take it away.
Thank you, Samantha, for handing it off. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, good morning, everybody. I thank you for the introduction, Samantha, and thank you, Tim, for teeing this up. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Maria Bocanegra. I'm one of 4 commissioners here at the Illinois Commerce Commission. Like Samantha said, what we do, for those of you that are not familiar, the biggest thing we do is we set the rates that you all pay for your electricity. So the agency is both quasi-judicial and quasi-legislative, which means, we do render judicial decisions that are subject to review, but we also promulgate, things like rules that the legislature may require us. And I say that because my next comment is my usual disclaimer that any of the remarks I say here shouldn't be construed as necessarily representing the views of the agency or any particular docket or any docket that may come before us. So I have to just put that out there. Can we go to the first slide, please? Okay, so like Samantha said, I'm going to talk to you guys today about some of the new clean energy legislation that was recently enacted on September 15th. It is, for those of you that don't know, the technical language, it's Senate Bill 2408. It was made effective on the 15th. It's nearly 1,000 pages long, so bear with us as we're still rummaging through it. What this law does, it amends and adds a variety of clean energy related legislation. But like Samantha said, I'm going to discuss the funding opportunities embedded within that. And I'll tell you what I think some of the considerations might be for fleet owner operators out there. What I've done here is I'm going to drop links to everything that you guys might want. So just pin that to your bookmarks bar, but it's got the workshop notice, the ICC landing page for the workshops, a copy of the legislation, and my email address as well. Next slide, please. Oh, I apologize. Can you go back one? I'm missing the, yeah. So the first thing is it makes amendments to the Electric Vehicle Act, the biggest part of which involves now and finally the utilities are required to develop beneficial electrification programs. And so I'm not going to read word for word what you see on the slide here, but I did try to highlight what I think is important takeaways for the purposes of this morning's discussion. And so after the workshops, which like I said, I've dropped the link there for you guys, the ICC, meaning the staff and of course the commissioners, we have to approve or modify some of the recommendations that are made. These recommendations speak directly to private fleet vehicles that include medium and heavy duty, and in particular fleets that serve or travel through environmental justice or eligible communities. And I'm thinking back to the map I believe that Tim had put up earlier about just some of the emissions and where those are in the Chicagoland area. So for fleets that are on this call that are private and seem to travel through that area, this would be one area where the ICC would be developing potential incentives or approving certain incentives. Again, also there's mention of school buses, whether private or public. And lastly, I highlighted the area relative to L2 and DC fast in rural areas and along state highway corridors. Now, granted, rural areas, I think we all think of downstate Illinois, but again, some of these fleets may be operating and driving through these areas. And so this is one additional part of that program through beneficial electrification programs that may be implemented by our agency. Next slide, please. So this section talks about what the beneficial electrification plans at a minimum are required to address. And specifically, I highlight your attention to part number 8. It talks about resources to support private investment, and it gives a litany of other options, as well as fleets. So fleets are considered in here. And so these plans have to be filed no later than July of next year, but of course the workshops are already starting. And so this is one area where if you are a fleet owner or operator, again, I would encourage you guys to participate in the workshops, file comments, or at least, follow what's going on to see what is being recommended. In addition, there is also going to be rebates. I know Samantha talked a little bit about that. The rebate program, again, is being administered through the IEPA, but it also would be applicable to private organizations. So again, for fleet owner operators, I think the really nice thing about that is it funds up to 80% of the costs. And so one thing to think about as we move forward with a lot of this new legislation is how can some of these things within the BEPs, that's what we're calling them, and the rebates, how can that offset some of the financial upfront costs that fleet owners and operators face? And so these are designed to work in tandem. So you can go to the IEPA, see what rebates are available, but you can also see what might be available under a beneficial electrification plan. So I think those two things combined offer a lot of opportunity from a financial perspective for fleet owner operators. Next slide, please. Sure. Here we go. Okay, so this is on page, if you're interested, on page 941 of a copy of the Act. It lays out what rebates are going to be available. And of course, again, they also apply to fleets. There's a couple of things here that I want to alert your attention to. So if you see the first word exclusively is highlighted, The rebates are only available for vehicles exclusively powered by electricity. So I know we've had some discussions here this morning about alternative fuels. I know hydrogen is a big hot topic with larger fleets, but just be aware that these rebates are only for true electric vehicles. And so there is the timeline for the eligible rebates. It's eligible for new or used. You can read more about that on page 945 if you are interested. These are one-time rebates. And so I guess we'll see, what sort of funding exists after these timelines. Next slide, please. So this is not necessarily directly applicable to fleets, but I'll show you some areas where I think there is some indirect application. So one of the things that the new law does is it creates the Energy Transition Assistance Fund, and the funding comes from ComEd and Ameren customers. It is capped at $180 million a year. There is priority in that very same order that you see on the slide from number 1 to number 14. But I bring your attention to this because within these programs, again, this may be another area where fleets should be asking themselves, how can these funds offset some of those investment costs, both on the charging station installation side, as well as the vehicles themselves. And so I think that thinking about it from that perspective means that, perhaps any money paid toward a contractor falling in one of these categories means potentially less capital and or operational costs. I think, there is a lot more language in the act, but I would only caution that, you should definitely be aware if there's any strings attached to working with some of these funds. And lastly, it also has some stretch code legislation. And so I think this is really designed to try to streamline building codes to really, in this case, suit whatever the fleet needs might be, and that can be crucial. So I would encourage all of you to follow the development of the stretch codes. And again, this could aid in your overall investment costs and bottom lines when we're talking about building codes. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, there are also a variety of Public Utility Act amendments. So these aren't new laws, they're just sort of adding and amending what's already in place. And so, currently there are energy efficiency and demand response program laws in place. This one amends it. And if you see in the highlighted area, it speaks directly to electrification. And it says that the utilities can promote electrification if it reduces total energy consumption, and can count such reductions towards savings. But here, I think this is where fleets can think about leveraging electrification as a means of reducing energy consumption at locations where your fleets will be charging. So think of garages or depots via energy efficiency and demand response programs. And so again, those programs are developed on an annual basis as outlined in the law. So there might be an opportunity again for fleets to have a say in that. And then the second part talks about public schools carbon-free assessment program. It's too long to read, but really I think the takeaway there is for school-related fleets, think of school buses or driver's ed fleets. I know that that's been a topic here in Chicago in the past. This can mean integrating fleet investments that are carbon-free and or reduce carbon emissions and increasing energy efficiency, again, on site, and pairing that with carbon-free energy usage as required in this new law, or this amendment rather. Next slide, please. So another interesting amendment to the PUA is the creation of the Renewable Energy Access Plan. This deals more with stuff on the transmission side, but I highlighted item number 4 specifically. When reading through this, in my opinion, I think this is one area, again, where fleets can leverage this requirement by participating in programs at the transmission level, if you will, or at the RTO level. When we talk about things like DER aggregation, and specifically thinking of fleet battery V2G programs or demand response programs, as well as on-site battery storage that would in fact have an impact on transmission investments, and of course, programs at the RTO levels. And so again, this is in conjunction and in addition to the EV workshops we talked about earlier. So again, this may be another area where there is an opportunity for fleet-related programs and policies to really take shape here. And then the second part we put in there was around an independent baseline assessment that's required within 30 days of the act. So we're looking roughly at October 15th. So it's an initial assessment, but one of the requirements is that we're asking the utilities to identify data deficiencies that may impact eventual multi-year integrated grid planning processes. That's a lot of jargon, but really what it is I think the takeaway here for fleet owner operators is this is where I think the continued concerns that we all hear about for both utilities and fleets is figuring out ways to effectively and efficiently integrate fleets to into the grid, as well as fleet planning, and on the other side, grid planning when we are expecting all of those fleets to come online. And so I think this is one area where there might be data deficiencies that can be identified and eventually addressed through some of the multi-year integrated grid planning. Next slide, please. Okay, and so the other thing is there is now performance metrics for utilities that choose to switch to performance-based rate making. There are performance metrics that must be implemented. So it requires that the ICC implement no more than 8, and there's a list there for you. And I highlighted number 4, achieving affordable customer delivery service costs. Now, how that metric is developed, of course, is going to be the subject of some of our dockets here, but it's something to think about in terms of what affordable might mean to a fleet customer or a larger commercial customer. I'll stop there. I'm not sure if there's any questions relative to any of the legislation that I've mentioned so far.
Yeah, I would just say, please add those in the chat and we'll cover them after the next speaker.
Yeah, next slide, please. And this will be the last one. So Samantha already touched a little bit about this, but it is worth mentioning there's other potential future funding. And this slide largely focuses on the Volkswagen settlement funding. So a lot of it focuses on buses, but from what I understand, some of this is scheduled to be updated now with the new clean energy legislation. So be on the lookout for more. There are websites you can access through the IEPA to learn more about that. And so that's all I have for you this morning, but I'm happy to take questions and answer what I can relative to some of the impacts this new legislation may have on fleet investments. Thank you so much. All right, I think this is where I hand it off to Jillian with Lion Electric.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thank you so much, Maria, for the introduction. And thank you to all parties involved for participating today and for inviting Lion to present and say a quick hello. I promise to make this short and sweet. So next slide, please. Great. Okay. I guess I'll just introduce myself quickly. Apologies for not saying hello earlier. My name is Jillian Safian. I'm a member of the Lion Grants team. I am a section chief of the grants and RFPs. I've been with Lion for almost 2 years now. In Lion terms, we say that's about an eternity. So I will just jump right into the next slide, please. So for anybody that doesn't know who Lion is, we are a medium and heavy duty purpose-built zero emission battery electric vehicle manufacturer. We have over 400 electric vehicles in operation today throughout North America that have been logging more than 8 million miles of service. Our factory, we are actually Canadian owned and operated. We have a factory up here in Quebec. And we are very excited actually because as I believe it was Dave had mentioned earlier, Lion will be opening a brand new manufacturing facility based in Joliet, Illinois. very excited about because we will be producing about 20,000 medium and heavy duty electric vehicles a year once that is open. We have about 8 experience centers that are currently open across North America. Our current employee total is around 900. So we are a great team and one that is growing very quickly. Next slide, please. So I was actually brought on today to speak about the grants team. What this image is showing you is what we call the Lion ecosystem. So from the moment that a client is introduced, there are a couple of different, actually more than a few different teams that will be introduced to client and will bring them along their customer journey. So again, I'm a part of the grants team, and I'm just going to be speaking a little bit about the service that the grants team offers to clients. We do have other groups. I will just kind of rhyme off their names quickly. We have the Lion Energy team, who is focused on the charging infrastructure aspect of the customer journey. We have the Lion Academy. This is basically the group of people who will help train and prepare fleets for their electric school buses, shuttle buses, or trucks. We've got the Lion Assistance team to basically handle any customer inquiries or to help with troubleshooting. And same thing with the Bright Squad, and the Lion Beat is our telematics group. Next slide, please. So the grant team, again, what I was asked to speak about today, we at Lion offer a turnkey solution for fleets. So basically our team helps to secure, apply for, we monitor, we track. We basically do all the behind the scenes work for fleets, so that when a fleet is interested and ready to purchase their all electric school bus, shuttle bus, or truck, we are most likely the second group of people that the fleet will meet once they have, obviously established a relationship, with the sales manager. So just to quickly rhyme off again what it is that the grant team does. So we help write the proposals and the narratives. We work on preparing and submitting all the documents for the fleet if that's something that they are interested in. We are able to create budgets, timelines. We work closely with the different grant agencies to ensure that applications we are submitting are quality work and applications that are going to be awarded the funds. And then post-award, we also support the fleets in terms of any types of obligations that the grant contract might outline for them that might involve reporting, telematics, and any other deliverables of that type. Next slide, please. So I think I have covered quite a bit. Oh, I'm sorry, I did skip ahead. I was reading from the other slide. So that was just kind of, again, a quick recap of what it is that the grants team, the service that we offer all of our fleets. And one of the most important points that I wanted to mention is that this is free. This is something that Lion feels is of the utmost importance for fleets when they are being introduced to us. And we understand the researching of the incentives, applying for the incentives, and being awarded. That is a major part of the journey, and we offer that service just to support. So I think I'll go to the next slide. I will just see where it is I am at. Yes. Okay. I think, yes, it would be important to mention some of the other tasks that the grant team, works on. That would be identifying project partners. I don't know, some of you might know about the EV truck and bus challenge that was that recently closed in the state of New York. That was a project that involved multiple different partners. So Lion was at the forefront to ensure that any of the applications that we submitted, we were bringing all the project partners together. So again, that's one of the roles of our grant team, ensuring that we obtain compliance with local, state, and or federal regulations placed on the fleets. One of the other important points that I think it would be interesting to discuss maybe in the question and answer period is just about stacking the funds. Samantha talked about such a great variety of incentives that are out there. And one of the jobs of the grant team, which we feel is most important, is which of those funds can be stacked together, just to help the fleets even more bring down that acquisition cost of their new electric bus, shuttle bus, or truck. We also can help identify opportunities, to improve the fleet's grant competitiveness. So that would include data collection, reporting, the vehicle usage, and the fleet composition for scrap and replace. One of the biggest components of the Volkswagen grants is that you must scrap a vehicle. So our team, along with the sales manager who would be working alongside the fleet, we work together very closely to ensure that the vehicles that the fleets are interested in replacing meet those requirements. So that's obviously very important for both parties. And I think just to close, there was one last point about requests for information, one of the other hats that we wear at Lion is that the grants team responds to requests for information, requests for proposals. We're also always interested in submitting comment letters, and we are constantly, basically thinking in the eyes of the fleet and the OEM, as we are an OEM. So just to make sure that the funding programs and the different incentives that are available, that the money is working hard for the fleets, and we're making sure that it makes sense for all parties. So I will close with that. I think the last slide.
Thank you, Jillian.
Oh, good. It just has my comment.
I appreciate it.
Contact information.
I apologize to everyone. I didn't do a real good job of managing this meeting. That the entire section was supposed to take 20 minutes and it took 40. So we're going to skip the next discussion section and go right into the fleet case studies. So if you could keep moving the slides forward to the case studies, please. That Liam from Waste Not want to hand off the meeting to you, and we'll do more questions here after Liam and Danny have a chance to discuss what they're doing with their fleets in Chicago. Liam, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, and I'll appreciate the constraint here, so I will make this as short as sweet as possible. I know a lot of the topics of my discussion have been discussed earlier in the presentation, so if we could move on to the next slide. My name is Liam Donnelly. I'm the co-founder, CEO of Waste Not Compost. We're essentially the ideal business model for a zero emissions fleet. We're a last mile service, most similar to that of like a residential laundry collection service. We travel throughout the city of Chicago proper, collecting compostable waste from a residential and commercial network. And we've been doing this for the last 9 years. With a growing fleet of electric vehicles. Since our beginning, we've been a zero emissions company. It was kind of a crazy dream I had when I was 15 to be zero emissions electric, doing a composting service. We've really been able to grow with it. So if we could move on to the next slide. Today, we operate a fleet of over 25 zero emissions electric vehicles. Most of those would be the step vans pictured here. As demand's grown, so has our fleet. And we're introducing our first wave of Class 6 and shortly Class 8 trucks, which is affecting operations in many of the ways that we're discussing here. But I know many of you are larger fleet owners operating tractor trailers. I'm really here to discuss more the last mile. We're coming back to the same depot every night. It's a way to really efficiently implement a zero emissions fleet because we're not too concerned about on the road charging or the need for expensive DC fast charging. It's important to note though that because we've been zero emissions since our beginning, we haven't used any grants to fund our fleet. We have no vehicles to scrap. We don't have diesel vehicles to turn in. So it's been a privately funded fleet, and it's one of the reasons that we've chosen to upcycle most of our vehicles. These vans pictured here were pretty much the first electric commercial van that ever hit the roads. And my job mostly, if it's not growing the company, it's to keep these things on the road. So if we can move on. I heard a lot of talk about charging. It's really tempting when you've got the backing of a corporation, funds behind you to go for the DC fast charging or just high power charging in general. It's something that we found is not necessary with our use case. We're operating 50, 60, 80 mile routes daily. At the end of the day, the drivers are returning to the same depot every night. It's something that they're responsible for ensuring that they leave and plug that vehicle in. We are having that, we're having discussions right now with a lot of the DC fast charger manufacturers. And I think Ken brought up a really good point earlier. It's easy to get swamped with information on different options on vehicles, but the same thing applies to charging infrastructure. We can look at some of the well-known DC fast charging manufacturers. They manufacture a great product and the price is comparable to the lesser knowns, but many of them require that you have a data plan. And for our use case where we don't need driver authentication, it's private property, and we can install sub-meters that can provide all the information on electricity consumption. It's not really something that we're interested in. And that's been a big struggle in the last couple of months, is trying to figure out if we should go with a smaller DC fast charging manufacturer to avoid the lifelong commitment of data plans. So the chargers pictured here are probably, they're not the lowest cost, but they're some of the lowest cost and most reliable level 2 chargers out there from Clipper Creek. We've done a lot of chargers throughout our time in the last 9 years. They're by far the most consistent chargers we've ever had to deal with, and they have the best customer support. And that's something that doesn't just extend to support of our vehicles, but we're looking for support of our charging infrastructure, the EVSEs. When those fail, if you don't have backups on hand, it can take a van out of service or require somebody comes in, fleet manager or night shift manager, to move vehicles around, and that's not very convenient. Now, if we can go on. I mentioned earlier, the biggest struggle is the first 2 weeks of implementation for new drivers. We hire a lot of career drivers that have never considered plugging in a vehicle every night. And that takes about 2 weeks to instill the habit, but also checks and balances. So it's a manager's responsibility, which is kind of ridiculous in my mind, to ensure before they leave, with the night shift manager, that vehicles are charging every night. And it's a very simple process, but when we get stopped by UPS and FedEx drivers, it's something that they are constantly concerned about is, what happens if you don't charge it? And really our solution for that was, they're the ones who wouldn't be charging it. It's not a responsibility we shift anywhere else. This is not relevant to the picture here. We can move on to the next slide, but critical, I know CTA representative spoke about this, and there was a question asked, winter, and something I don't often think about until it's too late. We are in Chicago, we're in the Midwest, our winters are brutal. We're operating a fleet of vehicles with batteries that are a decade old. They weren't designed for the temperatures that we put them through, and there is no battery warm up. There's no preconditioning on these vehicles. It's something that I think is critical, that if you're charging vehicles outside or operating them throughout the winter in a delivery model, you do consider that when selecting an OEM to work with. I know I've been in discussions with Lion. They're pretty familiar with the cold weather, and they have some great options there. And I think it's becoming much more commonplace to have those options. Heat is a huge problem. Drivers need to be comfortable. They need to be happy with these vehicles. You can't be sending them out in a vehicle in Chicago with a weak heater, but it will take at least 30% of the stated range off of these The only time that we've had vehicles run out of charge in service over the last decade was winter routes. They're doing the same exact routes they're doing in the summer, but they're not used to the idea that they have substantially less range. So I think that's a huge concern, something I'd really recommend you look into before purchasing a new vehicle, a new electric vehicle. Is just how are they going to stand up in the winter? What's the battery technology? And what's the heating technology for the cabin? The last thing, and I promise I'd make this short, we can talk about numbers all day. We are a business that appeals directly to customers for the most part. Our B2B division is very different, but our residential subscriber count, over 60% of our members, they choose us because we're zero emissions. It's not really something I can put a number to tangibly, but the marketing advantages of running a zero emissions fleet, being a first mover into this industry is huge. I did this out of necessity because it was something I wanted to do and I didn't have a driver's license when I started, so I was zero emissions then, but it's really paid off. Our customers are loyal to us. They understand that it's a learning curve, and I don't think we can put a number to it yet. I don't have that marketing background, but when over 60% of our subscribers are selecting our service rather than our competitors simply because we're operating a zero emissions fleet, I think that's enough financial backing for me to do it over and over again. Okay, thank
Well
you.
done, Liam.
Thanks, Liam. Danny, I believe you've been able to join us. You were on another meeting earlier.
Yep.
Thank you.
Everybody. Thanks, Dave. Thanks everyone for having me say hello to the group and welcoming some the experiences we have with Martin Brower. You can go to the next slide. For those of you who don't know, my name is Danny Fay. Sorry, I'm our Director of Global Operational Excellence and Sustainability for Martin Brower. Martin Brower is one of the largest supply chain providers to quick service restaurants. We're headquartered here in Illinois, in Rosemont, and we have a global footprint. We have 2 operations in Illinois, one in McCook and one in Lebanon. Over the last few years, we've become more aggressive with our sustainability. It's always been something we focused on, but we've signed up for what's called science-based targets a few years ago. So we've publicly committed to a 40% reduction in our carbon per ton delivered globally by 2030. That's aligned with a well below 2 degrees of global warming initiative. And as we've gone through that effort, we've obviously looked at a lot of technologies in a lot of places. Everything from biodiesel, renewable natural gas, renewable diesel. Here more recently, as you guys are talking a lot about today, electric vehicles and hydrogen fuel cells. We've had some successes with a lot of that, and some of that's still on the drawing board, of course. Locally, as we looked at this and we analyzed how we can help our footprint here locally, we looked at McCook, our operation in McCook. Our operation in McCook, has personal car chargers for the employees. We actually run the pallet jacks and forklifts with hydrogen fuel cells, but the traditional on-the-road fleet is still traditional. So we wanted to analyze what alternative fuels might make sense for that operation. Late last year, we looked at this operation of ours and discovered that from an operational standpoint, the route distance, the range, do we have time to charge? Do we have time to do the charging off peak hours? All that type of logic, our McCook operation could go electric, right? It made sense. And as you can see from the picture, most of our fleet is Class 8. We do have some straight trucks, but for the most part, we're a heavy duty distribution organization. So we're excited about that realization during the analysis. Unfortunately, when we started to look at the economics of it, we didn't have the same incentives that we could find to help us get there as we do in other parts of the country. So while the operation is still capable of eventually potentially going to electric vehicles, At this point, we've kind of put it on hold to kind of see how some of the incentive programs and everything developed in Illinois, so that we can make it sustainable, not only for the environment but also for business. So I don't have a whole lot more to share than that. I was just asked to give an update on some of the local analysis we've done in Illinois. Happy to answer questions about it, but looking forward to some of these incentive programs. I've made notes that the team here already mentioned. Thanks.
Danny, that was excellent. Greatly appreciate it. My hat's off to these two fleets for the work they're doing. They both recognize benefits to electrification. The challenge now in my mind, Maria, Sam, others, how can we help these two fleets as well as other fleets move forward and make the progress we all want to see? That's why it takes a village and why we're having this call today. There's opportunities in Chicagoland to move, and it's going to require all of us to participate. So I want to move from this into our final Q&A. Tim, if you want to come back on board, we got 10 minutes for fleets and others to ask questions and use the chat box. Was today's session helpful? What can we do moving forward to be jointly successful in getting rid of those red spots on the Chicago map? So let's open it back up to dialogue here, please.
This is Commissioner Bocanegra. Dave, I'll take a stab at that and make some follow-up remarks. I think one thing that we're seeing here at the state level and amongst different commissions is the increasing need to collaborate, both top down and between our agencies. I think that now more than ever, it's imperative that fleets, along with folks like Samantha's office, participate in our proceedings. These are the people that we need to hear from in order to hear what those gaps are, what the challenges are. If you're wondering how exactly participation works, what I can share is that in our experience here at the agency, when we're talking about workshops, you don't need to hire some fancy expensive lawyer. You can simply send in a representative from your organization to log on to the remote webinars in this case. You can file comments. And in fact, it's even more important now that you guys try to attend the workshops and participate collaboratively, because the law actually does say that the commission is required and can consider what took place in those workshops. So once a docketed proceeding is open, that's probably when you do need a lawyer. But when we're talking about just the workshops, it's as simple as having, if you guys have an umbrella organization that represents all of you on your behalves, it's something as simple as that. Certainly I would love to see the city of Chicago engage more to tell us, what their plans are, so that the utilities and, we understand where those funding gaps may be.
Thank you, Maria. And I just noticed one of the notes coming up, as Liam stated, he has no trucks to scrap, and that is a significant problem, especially in the heavy duty truck world, where they tend to only keep trucks 3 to 5 years. They don't have a 10-year-old diesel truck to scrap. So we're actually creating some really awkward scenarios for fleets where we're almost encouraging them to go buy an obsolete diesel truck, leave it on their lot licensed for 2 years so they can turn it back in and get a grant. That just strikes me as ludicrous. But that's why we need workshops and need more discussion. So lots of opportunities as we move forward to figure out how to work together even better. And I truly hope that Danny, Maria, that this future workshop can, I guess my goal, what I want to see Maria standing there holding an Egg McMuffin next to Danny's truck at a McDonald's in Chicago in 2 years and show the success of the electrification grants together. So that's my vision.
Yeah, and I'll comment, Dave, if you don't mind. That's actually something that we've considered, is going ahead and buying an obsolete diesel, running it for 2 years. So we have something to turn in. It's resulted in us paying outright for our new vehicles that are coming in. But that is something that we're looking for and we're constantly pursuing, is how do we get funding When I'm looking at those in our industry, major corporations, publicly traded, that are going in and getting incentives to transition their fleet to buy the exact same vehicle that we're purchasing. It's not always the best feeling to see Republic going out and getting 50% of the exact same BYD or Lion at 50% of the cost.
I do want to share that, doing this work with 4 cities on overcoming obstacles standing in the way of achieving these goals, it's so important to keep the conversation going. Today was an excellent example of people engaging and sharing what they see are the challenges, the opportunities in terms of funding, the resources that Maria's putting on the table that are there. And just that has to happen as the fundamental base for any real mobilization. Once you have that, you can start aligning and agreeing on, yes, of all the things to address, we need to stick together and overcome this issue first. And there's power in being able to declare that as in alignment with others. And doing that is very effective in terms of getting attention, prioritizing funding, creating programs that best support your goals. I'll put something in the chat that we did recently with the bus fleets of the transit agencies in the National Capital Region. We got 22 signatories, all aligned around addressing the issue that's now right on the desk of many people in Congress about, okay, we need to prioritize this issue for multiple reasons, as evident by all these people signing this letter. So Dave and Tim and others, I'd say keep convening these conversations. If you can do another one in Q1 and stay focused on the obstacles that need collaboration to overcome, that will be very effective.
Great suggestion. Thank you.
Oh, here's something in the chat about leased from Jeff Peterson.
I'm reading it right now. Certainly, I know Ryder is involved in leasing electric vehicles. I've been at their facility in Lexington, that's actually Georgetown, Kentucky, and they are working with battery electric vehicles. I saw an Orange EV vehicle there. There was a vehicle from another new OEM, Lone Star, makes Hostler yard tractors. So Ryder's definitely involved in this. Penske was involved in Run on Less. I know they're involved in electrification, and I believe Ideal Lease is involved as well. So they're all engaged. I don't know if they're participating in Maria's upcoming workshops or not, but certainly we can help her reach out to them if she needs that help.
One thing I've heard in many of these discussions is, as these incentives and programs and collaborative approaches, et cetera, as the process unfolds and successes are told, we need to have the ability for interested fleets to be able to access this information in a streamlined way, so that, all these incentives, how do you find out about them? Who talks to who? Are there websites? So Clean Cities and also the Alternative Fuel Data Center offers some of those resources. But I think for the area, it would be nice to have kind of a place to go to learn and have it all consolidated.
Yeah, I want to jump in a second on the topic. This is Jan Kalp of leased vehicles. It's a really important topic, right? Because there are between, I think, 5 and 7 million vehicles in the US that are leased, right? Sedans, pickups, and trucks, right, from Element and ARI and Penske and all of those fleet management companies. And they are the ones who own the vehicles, right? So some of these incentives work well for the owner of the vehicle, not the user of the vehicle. And I can tell you, because we know them all very well, that all of them are building up very senior staff to address this, because it's disruptive for their current business, right? They run a business on leasing and providing fleet services, and EV is going to change all of that. There's no more fuel card, things like that. So I don't have an answer specific of Ryder and Penske, but they are all deeply involved in this. It's highly disruptive for their business. It's also a huge opportunity for their business.
This is Maria. I will try to answer the question. To my knowledge and rummaging through that 1,000 pages, there's nothing specifically that talks about leased fleets. But I think the larger, broader picture, which is good for those that are leasing, is that it just talks about fleets in general. And so I think, to the extent there's an opportunity for, rebates on new or used fleets that might be owned by Ryder or Penske, I think that is one area to consider. We have not engaged with Ryder or Penske with the ICC workshops, but that is a perfect example of groups that we do need at the table. We need more, fleet owner operators. We need more OEMs. These are traditionally groups that we have not heard from in just mostly a lot of the proceedings. But the EV workshops are fairly new, and now this time around they're a little bit more aggressive. And so I would encourage all of you guys to let them know about the workshops, and certainly my email is in there. I'm happy to point them in the right direction about who within our staff will be leading the workshops. There may even be an opportunity to present. The ICC just had a workshop earlier this month. A few folks presented on a variety of topics. So to the extent there are fleet concerns, that might be a really good forum.
Great. Well, we have now run up against our 2 hours. I want to say thank you for all of you that have participated in the dialogue today. Please feel free to send me your feedback, help us understand what we want to do if we reconvene in Q1 2022 to move the ball way farther down the interstate than we have moved it already today. HG?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dave. And thanks so much to all the speakers and everyone who put in the hard work to make this happen. Again, this is exactly what's necessary to move in the right direction. I just want to make sure you all know you're very welcome to join us on December 9th in person in Chicago for mobility and transportation. I've reached out to several of you already in terms of a possible speaking opportunity at this stakeholder challenge. This task force will be summarizing the efforts and accomplishments it's had so far and sharing some of your feedback. So again, I hope you'll be able to join us. We'll make sure that discount code is made available to you if you'd like to register to join us. So thanks again, and please stay in touch with us as we move forward with this conversation. And well done to the AEG Task Force for Chicago. Bravo.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, John. I see your note there. Appreciate your being involved with ComEd, and I'm sure we'll have active engagement from you on December 9th.
Thanks, HG. Great job, everyone.
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to sign off, but this was outstanding, and I look forward to this conversation growing. I think this was really well done. So high fives to all.
HG. Great teamwork by everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Good stuff.